Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all very much for coming to this licensing subcommittee of the London Borough of Merton, which is now in session. I'm going to do some housekeeping bits before we go any further, but I just would introduce my colleagues. I'm Councillor David Simpson. I'm chairing this panel this evening. On my left is Councillor Paul Kohler, and on my right is Councillor Aidan Mundy, all of which are very clear to you by named in front of us. Fire drills. There are no fire drills scheduled, so if the fire alarm does go, there's an exit over there, there's an exit over there. I'm not very good at the aircraft things, but those are the two ways out, plus doors at the back on the right-hand side as I look up this chamber. So I want you to note that this meeting is being filmed for subsequent broadcast on the Council's website. Therefore, by entering the chamber, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for broadcasting and/or training purposes. As your images cannot be removed post-recording, so if you are a member of the public and do not wish to have your image captured, you should sit in the appropriate seats in the public gallery at the rear of the chamber. So if you have any queries regarding this, then please speak to one of the council's staff here. So I've already made the introductions now as to my colleagues. Just want to inform you that all parties, that the subcommittee will follow the hearings procedures, a copy of which was included in the notice packs which have been sent out. I'm now going to ask the legal advisor to inform all those present that the subcommittee had a briefing prior to this hearing, and if you'd like to say a few words, Mr. Bishop.
Yes, the committee read the papers before the meeting. I've flagged up certain issues that have been raised in some of those papers, so that as a reminder to them for them to look at those things. I didn't give any legal advice in that meeting, and that's all I'm going to say at this stage.
Thank you very much. The licensing officer, are there any technical issues about which you feel might be needed to be brought to our attention?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth MacDonald. I think it's all explained in the agenda items, but I would just say that there were 5 plans submitted. I think 2 of them might be the same, might just be 4 that you're looking at. But there was nothing that I could see in the application which would explain how they would be used, because there are 4 plans that have been sent in. So I don't know whether you would want to find out quite what they're going to do and how they're going to make that work.
Thank you very much. So the way we will now proceed is I'm going to invite the applicant to speak to us to make the case for the application.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Michael Bromley Martin. I am a barrister, and I'm representing the applicant for this premises licence this evening. I was last here in 2017, about the same time of the year, making an application for the first premises licence for Eastern Electric's 2019. At that time, the application was for a capacity of some 20,000 persons on the Saturday of the festival. There were a number of representations that were made during the course of that hearing, but at the end of the meeting, your committee granted the licence with a capacity of some 17,000 on the Saturday, and with a very large number of conditions. The 2017 event took place. It was successful. There didn't seem to be overly much difficulty involved in Eastern Electrics and its move from Hatfield House to the local park. It was not until 2018 that problems emerged. By 2018, the capacity was up to the 20,000 that had originally been asked for. It again took place over 2 days, but there were difficulties, considerable difficulties, some would say, in relation to the operation of the festival in 2018. I hope that I haven't left anything out when I set them out in three main categories. The first is noise. The second is security. And the third is litter and sanitation. And I'm going to come to each of those three in a little while, if I may. But I'm going to start, however, with a rather more overarching consideration. And that is the impact that this festival has on the borough of Merton, and indeed in relation to the park. This application, made in the autumn of 2018, originally applied for 3 days of festival, that is to say Friday, Saturday and Sunday. The capacity applied for was in relation to 2019, a figure of 23,500 persons on the Saturday. I forget the figure for the proposed figure for the Friday, but as you'll hear in a moment, it doesn't matter, and 15,000 on the Sunday. And the application was for that license to be permanent, with an ever-increasing number of persons to attend, running up to 30,000, or more precisely 29,999 by 2021. Since that application was made, there has been, almost in my experience, extraordinary cooperation and consultation between the applicant on the one hand and the responsible authorities on the other. And I want to express my gratitude to the licensing authority, to the Metropolitan Police, and indeed to the Environmental Health Department of this council for the assistance that they have given us during the course of the consultation and conferring that has been taking place since this application was made. As a result of that, the application is different to that which was made last autumn. The application that I'm instructed to make this afternoon is this: an application for a 2-year license only. A license for those 2 years for only Saturday and Sunday, nothing on Friday. And of course for the festival only to take place once a year. The capacities for those 2 years to be in 2019, 23,500 on the Saturday and 15,000 on the Sunday. And in 2020, 27,000 on the Saturday and 17,500 on the Sunday. In addition, there is a raft of conditions. They deal with those three aspects to which I'm about to come: noise, security, and litter and sanitation. Of course, but they also deal with a number of other aspects, even down to the paddling pool. There has been conversation and conferring even this evening before this meeting, and I am grateful, as I say, to the three responsible authorities whom I've just referred. I understand the position to be that those authorities are content with that application in that form and with those limitations and with the necessary conditions, and I shall take you to those right at the end, if I may. I know that Police Constable Russ Stevens wishes to raise the issue of the paddling pool, and of course he will do that in due course, but I'm not going to address you on that subject just at the moment. There are, however, of course, as you know, a large number of representations made by local residents. And the committee will want to take very considerable, or have very considerable regard to those representations. I'm hoping by the end of this address, and indeed by the end of this meeting, I will have persuaded the subcommittee to believe that the conditions and the reaction to what occurred last year by and on behalf of the applicant is such that both the committee and the residents can be confident that they will not suffer the disturbance and the nuisance that was undoubtedly caused in the 2018 festival. I'm going to start by perhaps the most significant consideration, and one which most pertinently arose during the 2018 festival, and its noise. At the 2018 festival, as you might imagine, there were noise limits set in conjunction with environmental health, and indeed with Andrew Pickup, the senior environmental health officer of this council. Those limits were set at between 70 and 73 decibels. And the fact is that those noise limits were fully complied with by the license holder in 2018. I hear the noises off, but I do insist they were fully complied with, and it's accepted that they were fully complied with. The problem that arose was that those limits were too high. No one is to blame for that. Those limits of 70 to 73 are well in line with noise limits set at other comparable festivals. I live close to Clapham Common, and I know that the noise levels there are set at those levels, as you will have seen from the appendix to Andrew Pickup's addendum report or memorandum in the supplemental agenda number 2. The explanation for the additional noise or noise nuisance occasioned by those limits being set too high is all set out in Rob Dudley's statement. It's agenda item 5, so that's in the supplementary agenda number 1. I'm not going to go into all the reasons and the details for it. He does give a very full explanation. It has been at the top of the list for consideration, not only, of course, by the applicant, but by those that assist them, and in particular, Steve Anderson is here, noise expert, and available to assist the committee with any noise-related questions or considerations. As you will have seen, again, in the noise management plan, and that is Appendix 1 to Andrew Pickup's memorandum in the supplementary agenda number 2, and it's at page 13. A very full analysis has been made, and a very detailed plan has been provided. And it also involves the reduction of the noise limits. And the noise limits are now set between 65 and 70. As you will also have seen from that appendix that I was just referring to, that will then be the lowest noise limits, music noise limits, for any music festival that Mr. Pickup could find, including that one at Clapham Common. Or, I say that one, there are certainly more than one on Clapham Common. All that, spoken so easily now, in a matter of a few minutes, has been as a result of a great deal of work, and I repeat my gratitude to Mr. Pickup in this regard. But what it has meant is that in his memorandum, it would appear that the Environmental Health Department of this council is satisfied that the conditions, and indeed the noise management plan for the 2019 festival, are sufficient and indeed fit for purpose. Can I turn to security and stewarding? There are a number of representations in relation to the lack of visible security, the lack of visible police officers, and the inevitable antisocial behavior takes place. There is, as you will have seen, attached to Rob Dudley's statement, the Event Safety Management Plan, which has been reconstructed. It's to be found in Supplementary Agenda 1 at page 8. In particular, the problem seemed to be not so much a problem with security inside the festival event itself, but rather outside it. And that, of course, has a particular impact on residents, and that, of course, is understood. As a result, the security operation has now been split between 2 companies, not just one. One company is wholly responsible for security within the site, and a whole separate team and company are responsible for security outside. The entire operation of the security and security management has managed to be agreed in the Safety Advisory Group process. As the committee will know, the Safety Advisory Group consists of a large number of persons from the responsible authorities and other organisations, the purpose of which is to ensure the safety and the security of this event. The operation, or the fresh approach to the operation, is also, of course, recorded in the Event Safety Management Plan, and as you know, that indeed is conditioned into the licence in addition. Litter and sanitation. Particular problem, public urination. As you might imagine, it was not something that had not been thought of, but rather like noise, although all the requirements and conditions in relation to sanitation and things done to ensure that it was minimised as much as possible were all complied with. There were the right number of, apparently, external WCs, but there clearly weren't enough. So the entire position has been looked at afresh. Again, rather like security, it has been decided to split the responsibility for litter and sanitation. One company entirely responsible for the interior of the site, in particular in relation to the clearing up of the site after the event, because there have been complaints and representations in relation to the amount of time that it took to clear the site after the event in 2018. And a completely separate operation of litter collection and sanitation and additional public WCs outside the site. That will be an operation that will be ongoing throughout the festival. Again, these matters have been the subject of considerable debate, consultation within the Safety Advisory Group and in other meetings prior to this evening's meeting. And it's understood that the combination of the separation of the litter and sanitation operations in the way that I've described is satisfactory to the Environmental Health Department and other responsible authorities. We do not want anyone to believe that simply because we believe that we have now found all the necessary ways in which the difficulties experienced in 2018, that we believe that we have found the solutions and that what we are proposing this evening will ensure a safe, nuisance-free and comfortable 2019 festival. I would not want anyone to think that we are complacent. When I say we, that's rather royal we, because I'm of course talking about the applicant. We are still very, very conscious of the potential for nuisance to local residents. I know residents may find this difficult to believe because so often these things become so concerning to them that they find it difficult to understand that applicants such as these are anxious to make sure that residents are not made the subject of nuisance and difficulty caused by the operation of these festivals. But we do ask the residents to accept that we believe that we have done everything that is necessary, and indeed a little bit more than that which is necessary, to ensure that the festival this year and in the following year will be both nuisance-free, safe, and successful. Now I'm going to turn to the conditions that we are also are asking the committee to impose. They can be found, first of all, in relation to the Metropolitan Police and Police Constable Russ Stevens, at page 38 of the agenda report. And as can be seen, there amount to some 7 conditions, including the one in relation to the, it says there, swimming pool. You won't be able to swim. It's better described as a paddling pool. There are those there from the Metropolitan Police. In relation to environmental health and Andrew Pickup, there are conditions at page 45 of the agenda report. And then again, in the memorandum to which I referred earlier, that's in the supplementary agenda number 2 at page 10. And there are there, if I can find it, a further 4 on page 10 of the supplementary agenda. In relation to the licensing authority in Barrycroft, at page 41 of the agenda report, and over the page, and there are some 7. Can I just say in relation to that one, this is a small side issue, on page 43, the final condition proposed by Mr. Croft is in relation to electronic identification, as opposed to identifaction, scanning equipment. I have had the opportunity to speak with Police Constable Stevens, Russ Stevens, this evening prior to the meeting. And I understand the Metropolitan Police are content that there is not electronic identification scanning in relation to all persons entering the premises anymore. But as I say, that is a side issue. It may not be that we need to come to that again. There is a second set of conditions for the licensing authority and Barrycroft, and that is page 5 of the second supplementary agenda. And there are 12 of those, and you'll note number 11. And of course, number 10 has to be filled in. In addition, of course, to those are the conditions proposed by the applicant himself or itself. And I've now forgotten to place down the reference for the conditions, but they can in fact be found on page 22 of the agenda report. And I haven't added them all up because they're all in each section separately numbered. But there are a large number of them. Having gone through all those, I at least identify where they can be found, can I assure again the committee, all these conditions have come about as a result of a great deal of work by all persons involved, and with the exception of that one in relation to the identification scanning, all these are accepted by the applicant, and we would invite you to impose them upon the premises licence this evening. Can I finish before I offer Mr. Robert Dudley for any questions that the committee or indeed any other party might have in relation to the application, and Steve Anderson in relation to any questions in relation to noise. Draw the attention of the committee to the letter that has come from the Manny House Care Home, which can be found at the supplementary agenda 2 on page 1. I don't propose to read it, and I've no doubt the licensing subcommittee already has done. I would be very happy to answer any questions that anybody has of me about the application, as I say, Mr. Dudley on the one hand and Mr. Stevens on the other.
Thank you very much. If you could just press your microphone off, that would be very kind. Thank you. So we're going to move now to questions by the responsible authorities and then take some from the interested parties. So I'm going to start, if I may, with the Metropolitan Police.
Thank you, Chair. As the committee will be aware, on the plans that have been submitted with the application, there is a swimming pool or a pool section and a stage that accompanies that. We've had discussions about this recently. I'm just still generally uncomfortable with the swimming pool, and I would like a discussion in front of the subcommittee as to what exactly the swimming pool stage entails. Can I just invite you just to describe exactly, I'm talking about the depth of the water, the security measures in relation to that swimming pool, please.
So the idea of the pool is it's a pool stage, it's not a swimming pool. The depth of the water will be 800 millimetres, so it's just above sort of knee height. The idea is to evoke an Ibiza-style pool party. With regards to control and management of the pool, we've developed and shared a draft pool management plan, which I shared with the police yesterday, and that outlines the measures that we'll put in place to operate the pool area, which includes the number and location of SIA personnel who will be controlling access to that area and monitoring the behaviour of attendees in that area. It also talks about the number of lifeguards that will be on duty, and also the rules around the operation and use of the pool. The pool is in an area of the site which has its own capacity control, so that whole area can be controlled, and then there's a separate capacity control that's going to be operated on the pool itself. The area features changing rooms and lockers. Patrons are not able to just take their clothes off and enter in their underwear. They would have to come prepared to use the pool by bringing swimming attire with them and make use of the changing facilities. There are showers, so once people have used the pool, they can wash chlorine off themselves. There's a water trough to walk through before you can enter the pool, so that we can maintain the clarity of the water in the pool, which assists the lifeguards in monitoring the pool while it's being used. And it's not proposed that the pool area is in use for the duration of the event. It's a sort of daytime, late afternoon thing. So access into the water element of the pool would be restricted from 7 p.m. and then just the music stage would be permitted, with people allowed to be in front of the pool area but not in the water.
Just to confirm, what are called swimming pool conditions, but really the pool conditions that are set out on page 39 of Russ Stevens' representation. And in addition, are you happy to have an additional condition that would ban petting in the pool area? We thought of adding the word heavy, but we thought it would be sufficient to merely have the expression petting, because that was a concern of Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, happy to agree to those conditions.
And if anyone wants to know where the swimming pool...
Sorry, Mr. Bromley Martin, what exact words are you thinking of as the condition?
There shall be no petting in the pool area. And if anyone wants to know where the pool is, of course we've got the plan, which is immediately after page 28 in the agenda report, shows the pool area in the top northwest corner of the site.
In that case, I will move on to, if I may, to the licensing authority to make their to ask any questions. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. No questions from the licensing authority.
Thank you. Environmental health.
I'd just like to raise that you mentioned the noise conditions on page 45 of the committee report. We have amended these to the conditions on page 10 to the supplementary agenda.
One is the ones on page 10 are the amended conditions that you seek.
Yes.
Yes, forgive me, I should have made that clear.
They replace the ones on page 45. Replace the ones on page 45, yeah.
They replace the ones on page 45. They are not additional to the ones on page 45. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to just move to interested parties who might try and catch my eye if they want to ask a question at this point. You're not making statements, you're merely asking questions. So I see Councillor Pearce, and then I see a lady immediately behind him. So Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about the second supplementary agenda. There on page 27, there are comments about opposing the licence application. And on page 28, there are responses and the representation from, I assume, We Are the Fair. Is that right? I don't want to misquote you. Page 28. Okay, I'll carry on. F, drug dealing and drug use. I believe this problem will be impossible to control as the dealers will just move around and avoid detection. The size of this event attracts more drug dealers every year, and it is unacceptable to expect residents to put up with this. Was that a quote from you, or was that a quote from a resident? Because if it's a quote from you, it's
Sorry, I think that's from a resident. It's not from the applicant. At this stage, the committee's asking for you to ask questions if you have questions.
If I haven't made myself absolutely clear, at this stage you're invited to ask questions of the applicant, not make statements. So any statements you wish to make will come at a later stage of the agenda. So I'm just going to ask again if there's anybody who wishes to ask a question. The lady with the in the top, yes. Could you give your name, please?
Yes, hi, Christina Skoczka here. The representative of the applicant stated they're aware of the problems with 2018. There were 400 complaints made in regards to noise. If we think about maybe 4 members of household or per house, so that's about 1,600 people. I want to ask what penalties were imposed on the event organizers for breaching so many conditions and causing such high level of disturbance and nuisance and trouble for local residents.
Thank you for that. Would you like to respond at this stage?
Yes, I can confirm that there were no breaches of any conditions of the licence in 2018, nor indeed were there in 2017.
Thank you for that. The next question, please.
Sorry,
yes.
Forgive me, could I just deal with...
There are questions. Yes, can you give your name, please?
My name is Elspeth Clark. My question is, bearing in mind there were problems in 2017, which should have been addressed in 2018 but weren't, why weren't they put in place last year?
It is considered by everybody that the 2017 festival was a success. Well, I'm afraid that is the position.
So I'm going to just move on just a moment and ask my colleague, Councillor Mundy.
Hello there. Sorry, could you just elaborate on the 2017 concerns you had? So there's a more of a pointed question rather than a generality that may help in ascertaining the response that you're after.
The problems included not only noise, which we felt considerably in London Road, but also the antisocial behaviour, particularly with regard to St Lawrence Church and the nursing retirement home. And we were told all these things were going to be addressed in 2018. All these measures we are being told about now could and should have been implemented last year. We're now being told, oh, all this is going to be wonderful this year. As they didn't happen last year, how can we be sure they're ever going to happen?
Thank you. That does amplify your question quite a lot.
Whenever you get 17,500 people, particularly 17,500 young people, as there were in 2017, in one place, there will always be nuisance. There will always be antisocial behaviour by, if I could finish.
Sorry, can we just keep some order in the meeting? If it would be most helpful just to listen to the responses that are given to questions. Those of you who have other issues around the answers may wish to refer them to those in your statements later in the proceedings. Thank you.
Of course, that does not mean to say that there is any complacency about the fact of that antisocial behaviour or that nuisance. In 2017, and I repeat it, that year the festival was considered to be a success. I've no doubt that notwithstanding that it was a success, there was some antisocial behaviour and there was some nuisance to local residents. That is accepted. 2018 was quite different, and the 2018 festival required addressing, and that is what has been done with the assistance of the responsible authorities.
Thank you very much. The next question from an interested party. Yes, madam.
Hi.
Giving us your name.
Sorry,
please, if you will.
Maslin, St Helier Ward resident. The care home whose proprietor has written the letter of support. Did the applicant donate any money to that care home?
As can be seen on the same page, towards the bottom of the page, there was a charitable donation made. No, it's not what you think. A charitable donation was made to the hospice. I can confirm that no money has gone to the care home whatsoever.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Yes, gentleman across there. Again, giving your name to start.
Hi, I'm Imran Hamid. I live on Hillcross Avenue. And something similar to the young lady asked before the question. It's relating to why should we believe what the applicant is saying this year, all the promises and how they care about the environment and residents, whereas last year nothing like this was taken into consideration, considering the sound levels. It's a simple question with a simple answer. Thank you.
There has been no breaking of any promises. As I've already explained, there were no breaches of the conditions last year. Such problems as there were identified in 2017 were thought to have been addressed. And Mr. Dudley has just been whispering in my ear about the action that was in fact taken between the 2017 festival and the 2018 festival. But it was insufficient to avoid the difficulties that arose in 2018. But there's no question of any promises having been broken.
Sean Cunniff, Head of Customer Services and Officer responsible for registration services. I'm just seeking clarification from the applicants on the dates of the event. In 2017, it was held on the first weekend of August, and at the mop-up meeting afterwards, I asked for some flexibility in that and was told that absolutely not. It had to be the first weekend of August in each year. In 2018, it happened on the first weekend of August, and I now note in the application that there's some ambiguity over whether it's going to be the first weekend of August or the second or the last weekend of July. And I'm just seeking clarification that if you're not prepared to fix the date to the first weekend of August, would the committee be mindful to place a condition on that being the fixed date? The reason being that obviously the registration is in close proximity and we have a duty to offer a service to our residents, and we can't do that if we're continuously being asked to move dates and to make alternative arrangements.
I can confirm that the date for 2019 is indeed the first week of August. It's the 3rd and the 4th of August. And in 2020, it's on the 1st and the 2nd of August. And it will, the intention is that it should always be in the first week of August, and only the first week of August.
Thank you. And the next question was from, yes, Madam, would you like to give your name?
Yes. Elaine O'Keefe, we're residents in the park. In 2017, we highlighted to your client that we needed security because we were in the park. At the time, we highlighted the fact that the security you provided was inadequate. You didn't provide water, you didn't provide toilet facilities for them, and in fact, you didn't provide the care continuous. We opened our home to that person and gave them toilet facilities. Again, it was addressed with the 2018, and we were informed at the time that would be addressed and you'd look after your members of staff. What provision? I can't see any provision that you've provided for the security and the staff that you're going to give to the park. There seems to be no provision for care of your staff, and it's up to the public to provide toilets, water and amenities for them. I just want to know what your position is on that, because it seems to be 2017, nothing happened, 2018, nothing happened, and you seem to have no provision for that now.
We did provide security in that area. The security company are meant to be able to provide welfare facilities for their employees. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. As Michael's already pointed out, security provision for future events will be parcelled up amongst a number of companies so that it's easier to manage defined areas of the event, the interior and the exterior. So when we're looking at external security positions, considerations will be given for their staff welfare, so cover for breaks so that they can take food, toilet facilities for those staff. We'll obviously need to agree a location for those toilet facilities with residents and the local authority, but that's something we'll be addressing by using different security providers.
Thank you very much. Another question from an interested party at this stage. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Julia Menold. I live on Hillcross Avenue. I have a question regarding to your plans around the collection of litter. You said that you're confident this won't be a problem anymore because you are separating out the operation between litter collection and litter removal after the festival. Now, could you elaborate how this will address the problem of litter that will be found or will surely be found around the festival site and then the streets surrounding the area? I'm particularly thinking of those little gas canisters that are probably an issue for public safety and also protective of children of harm. I'm just thinking of my toddler being very curious about all this little gas canister that she might be able to find for weeks to come after the festival. Thank you.
So again, the plan, as we've mentioned, is to have separate companies looking at separate areas of the event. So one cleaning and waste management company focusing on the event, so stuff that's taking place within the park, and then a separate company looking after the exterior. So we sent over as an appendix to the statement a couple of diagrams, one of which is titled External Waste Management, and that shows the initial suggested remit for the external waste management company for where they would carry out litter patrols. We're also able to send people to particular addresses if we're made aware that there's litter related to the festival in a particular area. We can send cleaners to respond to that area. We can define this, as I say, this is where we suggest that the external cleaning team concentrate on. These are areas that have been highlighted through the representations, and also they are the main routes to and from transport hubs in relation to the park. We'll obviously, if the licence is granted and we continue the planning process for the event, we'll agree with the local authority whether or not we need to look at any additional areas for off-site cleaning. But yeah, I've already attached the first draft of what the external waste management would look like. And then with regards to internal cleaning, separate team dealing with that, and then we obviously have to do a handover with the parks team once we are ready to leave the site, and they have to be satisfied that we've cleaned up satisfactorily after ourselves, and they wouldn't permit us to hand the park back to them until they're happy with the state that it's in with regards to cleanliness.
Thank you. Now, are there any more? Yes, madam. No, two, right.
Oh, sorry. That's right. Thank you very much. My name is Viera Hamid. Sorry, I just have a very quick question on the numbers. We keep hearing team this, team that. What does it mean in terms of how many security they're planning to have? How many toilets are they planning to have this year in comparison to the last year, for example? Thank you.
The position in relation to numbers is a matter for negotiation between the premises licence holder and the Metropolitan Police. So those figures have not yet been finalised, but they will be placed within the Event Safety Management Plan, which itself will be conditioned into the licence, as I have said, and indeed available to members of the public to see.
In terms of off-site toilets, that's what it's suggesting.
We have plans for suggestions of the appropriate places for not only security staff, but also the necessary WCs as well. And is it in the agenda report?
Yeah, it's an appendix to the statement that I sent last week. So
yes, it's appendix number 2 in Mr. Dudley's statement, which is, as you know, in supplementary agenda 1.
Appendix 2, supplementary agenda 1 that you have.
Can I just mention, are these the toilets on the outside rather than on the inside? Okay, and what numbers do you have for the inside? You know, especially when you're expecting more than 17,000 people. And the issues were raised last year and year before as well.
Hundreds.
Sorry, how many hundreds?
We can't be specific at this moment.
We can't be specific at this stage. It's all these matters are agreed with Environmental Health Department and the Metropolitan Police, and whatever they require, whatever those two organisations require, are provided.
And sorry, how many numbers of security will you require?
I was referring to, as well as WCs, also security. The same applies.
So at the moment you don't know?
We've got a very good idea, but no, the exact figure has not been established.
I have one more question, and it's in relation to exits and entrances. Where will they be? Last year they were from Hillcross, and apparently that wasn't supposed to be one of the exit or entrance, and it caused considerable disturbance to people on Hillcross Avenue till very early hours in the morning. People were camping on grass verges, so I would like to clarify which parts of the roads will be actually used for exit and entrance.
So the intention is for the audience to exit via the road that leads past the college onto London Road. We've no intention of directing anybody out through any other exits in the park. And the plan for this year will be, as I've mentioned, the external security company. One of their remits is, their primary remit is obviously the exterior of the event site. And when we're determining the position and number of those staff, representations will be factored in. So areas where we've been made aware of from 2018 that are a cause of antisocial behaviour, we'll make sure that we've got staff in those areas.
So are you saying that the only exit will be from onto London Road via the swimming pool road?
Yeah, that's the primary ingress and egress route. There is a secondary artists route through the south to Lower Morden Lane, but that's for performers only, not for audience members. And then obviously this we're talking about the main entrance to and from the park, but from within the festival site itself, inside the park, there's multiple emergency exits were it to be needed.
Right, okay.
Could I just add something to the answer that we gave about the numbers of both security staff and WCs? The final figure is never determined until the number of persons expected to attend. So depending upon the number of tickets that are sold, so the security and WC numbers are assessed.
Thank you for that clarification. The next question, Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick McLean, Cannon Hill Ward. What's the rationale behind or thinking behind a 2-year licence as opposed to the 1 year?
Not quite sure what the questioner is asking me to answer. The original wish was to have a permanent licence for the festival once a year. There are all sorts of reasons for wanting such a licence, including the need to make an application each year. Then, of course, the suggestion was, indeed the application was brought down to 3 years, following consultation and suggestions made by Metropolitan Police and the licensing authority. It was agreed that it would be most appropriate for there to be a 2-year licence.
Thank you. I did read in the papers that the reasoning was convenience, that it was deemed to be a bit inconvenient for the applicant to come back every year. We, of course, wouldn't want to inconvenience him. And also it was cost. Again, the cost to the clean-up and the residents is substantial, and maybe a further contribution on that front would be appreciated.
I mean, I didn't hear what the final question was.
Could you just repeat the final part?
Can you just confirm, as is in the papers, that the reasoning for initially not wanting to have just a single licence was because of the convenience, and it was inconvenient for your applicant to come back year on year to make another licensing application?
There are a large number of factors as to why it is better to have a permanent licence, all other considerations aside, not least of all the cost of the renewal fee.
Thank you. Now, I saw the lady over here. Yes, in the black there.
Hi, my name is Natalia Luke. I would like to ask if it's possible to protect all the trees in the park rather than cutting them down for the convenience of not them falling on the people there. I think, you should rather put some fences around the trees.
So in terms of protecting the trees, we do work very closely with the parks team and their arboricultural manager. I'm aware that lots of people have made reference to the fact that some trees were cut down as a direct result of the festival. That's not the case. Included in my statement is a quote from Dave Lofthouse, who looks after those things in Morden Park, and he confirms that conservation of deadwood trees is done as a matter of course and is not a direct result of the festival. There are large areas within the festival site where we do have to fence off the trees so that attendees to the festival aren't in direct contact with them. So we do fence off the trees, and we can't really be held responsible for any deadwood trees being cut down, because that's a matter of course for the parks team anyway.
Thank you. Next question.
Could I just, in answer to that, the use of the park does not come free. There is a fee that is paid to the council and the park for the use of the park, and the fee is in the region of some 90 to £100,000 for each festival.
Thank you for that clarification.
Pippa Maslin again, St Helier Ward resident, specifically in the Hatfield Mead Estate, which is just across the road from the park. We are extremely fortunate to have little owls and kestrels in Morden Park, and summer is a crucial breeding time for them. Does the applicant accept that the event will do harm to those birds?
Again, I'd refer to the conversations that we have with the parks team and their ecology officers. We obviously defer to their expertise in regards to things like that. The site plan takes into account any areas where wildlife needs to be especially considered. And as far as I'm aware, the ecology officer and the parks team don't have any concerns with regards to the impact of the festival on nesting birds. My understanding is that the relatively short duration of the event, 2 days, means that is too short to have an adverse effect on nesting birds and young birds.
But the setup time is longer than 2 days. And take down, yeah?
Yeah, I appreciate that, but there's no loud music and no considerable volumes of people on site during that time.
But there are vehicles coming in and out, there is noise. It does disturb them, I would say. I would like you to agree.
Again, I would just say that we work with the parks team and their ecology officer.
Yes, Madam there, yes.
Heath White. I live next door to the park. Doesn't work. There was greater security provided by Eastern Electric, but we also, as a church, we provided stewards throughout the event, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And having chatted to the stewards there, I would reiterate the comments of Lady here, their conditions were poor. We opened up the toilets at the church for them. I just want to ask, what further powers than us as volunteers would those stewards have in terms of preventing antisocial behaviour? They seem to have none in terms of actually preventing anybody from doing anything other than just being present in a high-vis, which we were.
As will be appreciated, civilian security officers do not have the powers of a constable of the police. And so the entire security operation has perforce to be conducted in full cooperation with the Metropolitan Police. There is an extremely, dare I say it, good relationship between the premises licence holder, the applicant, and the Metropolitan Police, particularly Police Constable Stevens. All I can say is that whatever the Metropolitan Police believe is necessary in terms of security, whether that be by either private security staff or by the use of police officers, will be applied and adopted.
I have an answer. Is the answer they have no more rights of stopping antisocial behaviour than we did as members of the public in a high-vis vest?
That's the first thing that I said.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any more questions from interested parties? Yes,
Forgive
madam.
me. Just in that last one, I understand that the private security officers are able to issue penalty charge notices.
Yeah, sorry, we're looking to work with Kingdom, who act as enforcement officers already on behalf of Merton. They help Merton enforce their public spaces protection order. So we'll be looking to engage some of their staff throughout the duration of the event, and they're able to issue fixed penalty notices in relation to antisocial behaviour such as urination and spitting and the like.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. Yes, madam.
Last year, we were told there was a Uber...
Could you give your name, please?
Oh, Karen Alexandrovich, Upson Road. Last year, they told us there was a Uber blackout, and that the pickup spots was up at the college. Well, I have video of hundreds of people at Epsom Road and Rougemont going on till 1 in the morning with fights where people are jumping into the wrong Uber. And I sent those complaints in. I'd like to know if they can guarantee my safety and all my older neighbors' safety from the people that are on our walls, in our gardens, breaking glass, doing the illegal and legal highs right in front of us. We can't go out and confront them. You'd be stupid to do that. And most of my neighbors are 100, 88, 89, 92. They locked their windows because they were so scared. So I want to know, you talk about security, there was no security in both years at all, and honking till 1 o'clock in the morning. So they come down the hill from the Harvester. If you live on Epsom Road, I'm sure none of you do, I'm a 2-minute walk to that stage. And the amount of people coming and going with their glass bottles and screaming and yelling and throwing and breaking in our gardens, that's unacceptable. No security. I want security. I don't want those people in front of my house.
I am sorry to hear that. Well, if you laugh at me, I won't be. But, of course, these things are to be regretted. This is the problem with having any large number of persons, particularly young persons, at an event such as this. These things happen. All I can say today is this. All the persons who are around the front of you here in this committee room, in this council chamber, are committed to ensuring that as little nuisance and disturbance just such as that, as is possible, will be averted. And there has been very considerable consultation with the residents themselves in relation to problems just such as these. And all I can say is that Mr. Dudley, and indeed the whole of the team involved in this premises licence, and indeed I feel sure that I can speak for the responsible authorities themselves, are committed to ensuring the minimum nuisance and the minimum lack of order and nuisance to residents as it is possible.
Thank you. I want to make progress. Continue. Are there any further? Yes, madam. One more question.
Thank you. It's Christina Skritschka here again. Agenda item 5, back to noise issues, which I have experienced considerably living on Hillcross Avenue. You state here that Additionally, in 2018, we experienced an unprecedented level of hot, dry weather, which might have also impacted on the number of complaints received. Planning for 2019 will take this into account. Now, I am not sure exactly what the statement is supposed to imply, whether people complain more when it's hot, or whether you can influence the weather, or whether you will make some other provisions that will prevent people from complaining during the summer. So would you please clarify how exactly you're going to make provisions for the August weather? Thank you.
I'm not sure that we're making any provision for the making of the August weather, but of course, when it comes to noise nuisance, that, of course, as we know, can be affected by the weather. We can expect the weather to be hot in August, and all the plans and all the arrangements, and indeed all the limits, have been set in accordance with that likelihood.
Thank you. Now, if there are no more questions...
Sorry, can I just add to that? I'm sorry to interrupt. There have been mentions in your statements twice. There was adverse climatic conditions quoted and atmospheric conditions, and they both times have been mentioned that they can impact on the way noise is experienced. So clearly, the weather is unpredictable. You can't control it, and even though you put provisions in place to try and care for these, you will have ultimately no control over that.
Can I ask Steve Anderson to deal with that, please?
I think the issue of whether is material. However, I don't think it would manifest itself as a particular issue for those residents that are most affected. Certainly Lower Morden Road and Hillcross are the hotspots because of the proximity. So a wind vector, if the wind is blowing away from you, then clearly that would generally always be an advantage. I think in that year, conditions were fairly stable and it was warm. The impact would be more likely to be enhanced at a distance from the event. So if people say they could hear it a mile away, then that could be a function of the particular warm weather. Where most of the complainants are from, and the ones that would be most impacted by the noise levels, the weather isn't really going to have that much of a material effect. Clearly, if it's hot, people have the windows open, they'll want to enjoy the outside, and they may not be sleeping quite as well. But other than that, the weather wouldn't impact dramatically on the levels in the immediate vicinity of the park that we're most concerned about.
Thank you very much for that.
Can I?
One more.
Yes, just to add to that, I'm glad you mentioned the opened windows, because my son's bedroom window faces the park, so he was not able to sleep because of that. So you were right, the weather has an impact, and clearly you're not able to make provisions for it, because I will have to have the window open whilst he's trying to sleep, listening to the music from the festival, which is only for under 18, over 18. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask my colleagues, I think, for their questions, which I think may be a number of them. So, Councillor Kohler, would you like to start?
Thank you. There's been a lot of the questions were ones I was going to ask anyway, so I won't now ask. I've got one general question, 2 specific points. Am I right in thinking the position of the applicant is that in 2017 and 2018 there were no breach of licensing conditions? In 2017 there were problems and the conditions were amended to try and address some of those issues. So I see all of that and I do not doubt your sincerity. What I'm not clear about is whether the applicant realises why things were therefore worse in 2018. One would assume, given that 2017 had gone quite well, there were some problems, tweaking it, things would have got better. But in fact, the opposite happened. Why is that?
The short answer is that given the array of talent all along these benches, nobody really understands why it was there were the difficulties that arose in 2018. There is in relation to the noise reports some suggestion that because of a complication, I may have to ask Steve to explain this, but the particular way in which music is recorded, is measured, and yes, no, behavioural issue is there's no particular explanation for it. All we know is that it needs improvement. I can't give you an answer as to why. I don't know whether Rob Dudley has any theories as to why it was worse in 2018.
With regards to a hard and fast answer as to why we received so many more complaints and why so many more residents feel aggrieved, the duration of the event was longer in 2018 than it was in 2017. It's gone from 1 day to 2 day, and the capacity has increased slightly. The distribution radius for the residents' letter increased considerably, so more people were aware of the event. And then obviously we're now aware of the issues and the feelings of local residents, and we hope to demonstrate that we've taken that on board and we've got robust plans in place to mitigate those issues going forward in terms of antisocial behaviour, littering, noise and so on.
And sorry, remind me, are we keeping the numbers and duration exactly the same as last year, or are we trying to increase it?
The numbers last year were 20,000 on the Saturday and 15,000 on the Sunday, and this year it has been agreed at 23,500 on the Saturday, but still 15,000 on the Sunday. Forgive me, there were 20,000 on both days last year on the licence, and that means that this year the proposal is an increase of 3,500 on the Saturday, but a decrease of 5,000 on the Sunday.
But only 8,000 came on the Sunday, didn't they?
Exactly, so the capacity wasn't used, and that's one of the reasons why the Sunday capacity has been reduced.
So the likelihood is the capacity will go up on both days this year?
The number of persons attending will go up, yes.
Sorry, yes. And is it given that one of the issues might have been going to a larger size from 2017 and 2018, does it make sense to carry on going higher when we've had more problems come up in 2018?
Well, I think the answer to that is, this is obviously what has troubled the responsible authorities, and that is why, coupled with the difficulties of 2018, so much trouble has been gone to do everything that I've spoken about in order to ensure the success of the 2019. But it can't simply be numbers, because in terms of other festivals which can take place without difficulty, I'm thinking in particular of Clapham Common, for instance, where there are very much greater numbers involved. So it can't simply be a matter of numbers. What it does mean, though, is that if you do have greater numbers, you do have to do more, and that's why so much more has been done.
Okay, can I just note on that point, though, given that the answer was numbers did go up between 17 and 18,
yes,
it seems cavalier to carry on going up when we've not addressed the issues that have emerged in 18.
Well, we would say that, yes, the numbers are intended to go up. Obviously, the responsible authorities know that that is the proposal. They are content that it should go up in the way that we are now proposing. That they know what the problems are, they know what the potential for difficulty and trouble and nuisance is, and yet those are the figures that we have now agreed. So I would commend them, and although, of course, you're absolutely right, there is a logical argument, which is it was okay in 2017 when there were 17,000 capacity on the Saturday, and it wasn't okay in 2018 when there was 20,000 capacity. Therefore, the problem must be the increase in numbers. That's the false argument that I would say one is in danger of falling into.
That wasn't my argument, but anyway, okay. Now, 2 points of detail. The Metropolitan Police were inside the venue on the festival in 2017. That wasn't possible in 2018. It's left on page 9 of the supplementary agenda. That issue is still being discussed. Will the police be inside the festival in 2019?
Police, they were on site both years. But in 2017, we made a financial contribution to the Met Police for a dedicated festival presence of officers. In 2018, they weren't able to offer that facility. We're discussing with them for this year whether or not they can do that, but there were definitely police officers deployed at the event.
So you're saying so all the paragraph on page 9 is just about payment. It's not about numbers of police officers in the event.
That's correct, yeah.
And lastly, on page 23 of the main document, do we on item 7 on page 23? Yeah. Do you have it? Do we have the drugs policy available?
For 2018?
No, for 2019.
2019, yeah. Can you bear with me? We have suggested a draft initially in conversation with the police. I'm just trying to find that now.
If I ask my question, it might help.
Turn your microphone.
Is paragraph 7 saying that guests with limited number of prohibited drugs will be allowed on? Are we really saying that crack cocaine, heroin for personal use will be allowable, or am I misreading paragraph 7?
No, the drugs policy would define particular types of substances, and then the quantity and type of substance would then trigger a response. So any amount of what we suspected to be cocaine or crack cocaine would result in no admittance, and we would attempt to restrain the individual and let the police know. So I hope that explains that.
Thank you.
Councillor Mundy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just firstly thank everyone for coming tonight? I know it's going to be a long night, but appreciate everyone's patience and perseverance, especially the applicant and everyone from the authorities. Just following on from Paul's question relating to that particular item, you just talked about Class A drugs. Could you go further and explain, is it a total no personal possession policy, or is there varying levels based on BC, etc.?
The plan would be to operate an amnesty procedure. So attendees to the event are given a couple of opportunities to amnesty any controlled substances they have on them. If they then attempt to bypass the amnesty and any quantity of drugs are found on them during the search procedure, then there's based on the type of drug found on them, the attitude of the individual in question would then trigger the response as to whether or not that person was ejected and handed over to the police, or whether or not anything found on them was confiscated and then they were ejected, or whether or not they would be permitted to attend the event but without any substances that they were in possession of. So that type of amnesty policy tends to be one that is operated through most metropolitan city festivals. If we were attempting to hand over every single person who arrived that may have one spliff of marijuana on them, the police would be run off their feet in trying to deal with that type of situation. So we plan on having a sensible discussion with the police as part of the planning process to agree a drugs policy that's satisfactory for themselves and us as operators. But the intention is that nobody is permitted into the event with any controlled substances.
I find it slightly contradictory in a sense that I absolutely accept that that's the standard way of practice, but at the same time you've suggested a total ban on a non-controlled substance in terms of the gas. So how does that play in terms of resource management if you're banning one and confiscate but allowing the other?
So in terms of allowing it on site, or?
So your answer was that basically the police effectively would be run off their feet, and so would your staff you've contracted. But if you're proposing a complete ban on a on a gas basically, but allowing an amnesty for other drugs, how does that correlate?
There's a ban on nitrous oxide as well. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's no permission for nitrous oxide at all. So anybody in possession of that is not permitted to bring that into the event.
Okay.
And then depending on the quantities, so if someone attends the event and they've got one cylinder on their possession, that's one thing. They wouldn't be allowed to bring it in. If someone turns up with a rucksack full of the stuff, we would attempt to hand them over to the police. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically when you in the documents you gave us, when you say ban, it is basically an extension of the amnesty policy.
Yeah.
So then so basically the general idea is that you wouldn't be able to get the substance inside, but once it is inside, hypothetically, what are the measures you would take to identify those individuals and take action?
So with the internal security team, they have covert response teams, and one of their roles would be disrupting any suspected drug dealers that may be on site. In addition to that policy, the festival is fenced. There's a back of house area between the public inside the festival and the exterior fence to prevent people from throwing items over the fence and then collecting them from inside. So there's two measures for preventing it for getting in from that point of view.
Sorry, just for my sort of concept in it. So you're saying there's a double fence policy, yeah?
Yeah, there's an area of back of house between the green high hoard fence and where the public are. The public inside the event are not right up against that fence. And we're also considering an external moat for planning for this year, which would be a Harris fence on the exterior. So in a sense, there would then be two sort of sterile areas either side of the fence.
Could you elaborate a bit further on that? Where's the conversation at with that double fence, effectively?
It's something that we'll discuss with the police during the SAG process if this premises licence is granted. There's several things to consider with regards to that. The length of the fence, the potential benefits that it may bring, whether or not it's reasonably practicable, because there's obviously a great cost involved in that amount of fencing, and there's already a moat to some degree in place, so we'd need to weigh up whether or not we and the police see a benefit in that, and whether or not that is deemed to be practicable. Yeah, hope that answers that.
No, it does. Sorry, back onto sort of my main questions I was going to ask before Paul helpfully highlighted item 7. So I'm just going to sort of 3 categories here going on your main argument, so noise, security and then litter. And then overall, we're really interested to hear a bit more about in how you see the community activation that you've detailed significantly, particularly in noise, but you've elaborated further in response to some of the residents' questions in terms of the feedback and how you would listen and how that would actually work in practice. And again, following on some of the concerns raised, how that would be staffed accordingly. So in terms of sort of noise, bring us back to 2018. I'm sure that you no doubt want to bring your sound experts to talk about the nitty-gritty of the mechanics and the machines that were involved and why that didn't work out. I'm more interested in understanding how the procedure failed and why it wasn't identified at the time, and how can that be prevented in future.
Okay, so in terms of what you might call a failure of the system, that would be possibly addressed by us focusing on making sure we weren't breaching license conditions. So we've agreed a set dB level not to exceed, which we didn't. However, conversely, we still managed to offend multiple residents. So for 2019, we're engaging a different noise management consultancy who have a different approach to noise management and how that would be implemented on site and the benefits that would bring off site. In terms of the complaints procedure, we'll also be refining how we deal with that. In addition to a noise telephone hotline, we're also having a dedicated community stakeholder manager working for the event this weekend. That was not a role that we had last year. So that's a person that's already in conversation with a lot of the key local stakeholders. As well as the dedicated phone line, we would have live updates on the website. So if people are experiencing noise and they want to get in touch with us, the decibel level readings that the noise consultant would be taking off-site, they would be posted regularly on a community page on the website so people could get real-time information. We'd also have an email address in case anyone rings and the phone's engaged, they can email to provide their feedback. And then in terms of management on site, as I say, we've got a new noise consultant for this year, and they've got a markedly different approach to managing noise at the event this year. So if maybe I let Steve talk about how he will manage noise at the event.
Could I just say, Councillor Mundy, there is some explanation for what went wrong in 2018 on the first page of Mr. Rob Dudley's statement, and it's this new or different sound system, the Screamism RC1 system, and the fact that that system did not allow for a great degree of output control, meaning that sound levels could vary considerably from track to track, and for a reason which I don't quite understand, because I don't know what a cardioid arrangement is, but that system also has a greater rear projection of bass. And in the next paragraph, it indicates what probably is the human element of what went wrong. The team was too highly focused on complying with the set levels and therefore the conditions of the license, and failing to see the bigger picture. And that is why to have telephone communication, the ability for persons to have telephone communication with the central noise control is so important going forward.
Any further questions?
I thought I've got several more,
Right,
but I thought Steve was going to continue. I was going to pick up off Steve's point about. I'll let you start. Go on.
If it'll be helpful, if I can just briefly run through where I see things moving from and to. I don't, having looked through the report from the previous year, I don't doubt for one moment that the measurements were accurate. The firm is quite reputable, and it was in compliance with its license conditions. I would be satisfied with what they would have done. The focus was very much on complying with the license conditions, and there wasn't a great deal of monitoring within the venues actually on the site. So basically, we're okay off-site. There's not a problem to deal with if it's in compliance. Clearly, the volume of complaints that were generated indicates that that mix of license criteria and tolerance wasn't correct. One area that wasn't included, which has been included in the noise management plan, we've had some discussions with Mr. Pickup about, is to include some sort of attention being given to the low frequency noise. And any one of these complainants that would have rang in, I'm sure the first thing they would have said was, it's the bass. And I can't pretend for one moment that I would make that disappear. It's a substantial event, as any park event would be in London or around. There is going to be noise-sensitive receptors, and there's a large number here. The low-frequency noise didn't feature in the monitoring exercise, so this year we have introduced some attention to that. Also, the levels have been reduced 5 dB, and it's not a simple case of saying, well, the event's too loud, just turn it down, because there has to be a certain level for the event to work. Otherwise, the people that have paid their money won't feel that they've got what they've bought and would be extremely dissatisfied. So it wouldn't make the event sustainable. We have, however, looked at reducing the levels, and we've reduced them by 5 dB. And I'm comfortable that that is achievable. I'm comfortable in terms of the discussions we've had with the PA provider this year. We have changed some of the setups, and without getting too technical about it, some of the setups are going to spill noise all over the place, as opposed to being more focused. So there's various techniques you can use to do that. I think the other difference this year is, we'll be having another member of staff because we need to make sure that the venues on site are controlled, and are controlled at even levels. With that, when that doesn't happen, what you tend to get is one stage will influence another stage. You'll get bleed into another stage. That other stage will respond to look after its group there by lifting the level. Correspondingly, that goes back in the other direction too, and you get this sort of leapfrogging. So we would look at greater attention being paid to managing the venues on site and balancing the sound on site, so that there wasn't that sort of competitiveness around. And so it's reduction of the levels, better PA, and that includes some technical configuring of the sub-base areas, which is the most disturbing. And we would look to a different approach of where we put our resource in managing. We're still going to be managing the off-site levels, but spending more time on-site, making sure that the venues stay where they are meant to be.
On that resource question, thanks for flagging it. I noted, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is it four members of staff allocated to this?
Yes, there will be other people. So, for instance, the noise complaints will be managed, and we'll be fed details of those complaints. But there'll be four. I would expect to have 4 crew on site.
So let's put some of the conditions in 2018 to 2019, and let's assume that there are 200, 300, 400 complaints. How would I'm just trying to think on a tactical basis, how would that actually work on the ground? You get a phone call in. Is there enough people on the phones to manage demand? Is there other ways? And I think there was an email channel as well. Are there enough people there to man that? What's the contingency? And also then, do you have enough people to respond to that, to go out, do that check, come back? Because they will be, correct me if I'm wrong, they're off site at that moment. So you're down a man. So how does that work?
Perhaps if I can respond to that a little bit, then Rob can add to the actual complaint handling. I would anticipate that the level of dissatisfaction was significantly reduced. So that's the first thing, because we'll have lower levels. And I have to say, it is a huge number of complaints. So I look after probably about 12 to 15 events typically through the year. And I've done 5 or 6 parks in London for not dissimilar events. And this is overwhelmingly the highest number of complaints. So I would expect that there will be certainly complaints. I would expect there might be more complaints because people will be now quite sensitized because of their previous experience. But I would expect the numbers to be considerably down. But as to how the complaints are actually physically managed, perhaps it's best if Rob could address that.
So, yeah, we've got additional staff dealing with that complaints procedure. We've got a stakeholder engagement manager. They would have a team working under them. There would be a person dedicated to answering the telephone. The telephone's got an answer phone system. When we get an answer phone, it automatically emails the team as well to let them know there's a voicemail message been left. The residents' letter that goes out in advance will also promote the website for the information updates that I've mentioned, and will give not only the telephone number but an email address as well. And then the number of noise consultants on site has increased from last year. Last year we had a team of 3 on site, and there's an additional body this year.
But back to my final question on that, someone would still need to physically leave the premises to check the decibel levels and then come back?
One person would already be assigned to being off-site anyway, so there'd be, if Steve's present on site, he would be managing the overall team. There'd be a couple of guys looking at the individual stages on site, and then there'd be a person off-site. Their entire role would be monitoring the agreed receptor points and then responding to individual concern areas.
And so final question on noise before I go on to security. You've got enough contingency in terms of staffing and personnel, holiday sickness, random things, life?
Yeah, we'll be building in a tolerance to staff rosters, especially in terms of security and then key production staff.
Cool, no, thank you. So, yeah, we dealt with that particular point in drugs. The swimming pool. Could you talk a bit further about that, the draft policy? I know you outlined in terms of depth and the no petting policy, and how would you enforce that? would it be a fine as well? How this? I'm just trying to think of the practical elements of this, especially in you've got a park, you've got people drinking alcohol, you've got moods are high. Well, how does this work? And particularly sort of tapping into previous experience, could you explain how has it previously worked?
So in terms of management of that area, it's in an already controlled area of the site. It's not within the middle of the footprint, so there's a control point for numbers into that area, and then the pool itself has a dedicated team of 6 SIA, so controlling access to the pool. Numbers of people permitted in the pool at one time would be capped. That's off the top of my head, 86 persons permitted in the pool at one time. The depth of the water is only 800 mil. In addition to the security who are going to be monitoring access in and access out of the pool, there are security patrolling the area and monitoring the behaviour of people while they're in the pool. If they need to enforce any of the pool rules, they've got staff, another response team that can assist them with that. In addition to security, there are medics dedicated to that area, so there's a medical post in that area. Staff in that area are obviously going to be prepped for any water-based recovery. And in addition to the security and medics, there are dedicated lifeguards, so not security who are trained as lifeguards, just lifeguards. All they're doing is lifeguarding duties.
Okay, so I may come back to the pool later on, but from the correspondence we've had from the police, the latest set, they had concerns about that. You may want to chip in. When you saw, did you make those representations after or before you saw the draft plan?
In relation to the pool, that's been subject to a number of conversations that we've had between us. Until fairly recently, there was limited information available to me to make any sort of risk assessment. Pool management plan and other details have been forwarded to me now. The most up to date, or the most thorough version was supplied to me yesterday. It's one of those things where I feel generally uncomfortable about it, but there are control measures in place that I've seen now. I'm just not in a position to actually say I'm fine with it. The measures are in place. Everything is there. I'm afraid I want to leave it to you to make a decision on.
Thank you. So moving on to close down and back to your previous point relating to the entrance and exit. How do you see that working given the number of people coming to the site and the time it takes to evacuate, and thinking about also just thinking to spill out onto the transport links? And linking back to Karen's point earlier about secondary and tertiary transport links, we're talking the Ubers of the world, but also mum and dad coming around picking up their kids. It certainly happened when I was younger. So how does that actually going to work in practice, and how will you steward it?
So as part of the event management plan, there'll be a separate document called the egress plan that focuses exactly on getting people from the site. An element of getting people in a controlled fashion away from the site involves a phased close down of areas of entertainment on the site. That is referenced in the noise management plan. Forgive me, off the top of my head, I can't remember which stage shuts down at which time, but the idea being that the main stage would go down. There would still be areas of entertainment further towards the back of the event site in the park. The idea being that each of these stages has a slightly different following. All of the stages are operated by different music brands who have their own fans. So if one stage is full and another stage closes, it doesn't automatically mean that audience is going to migrate to another stage. We know from past experience that once the main stage goes down, the bulk of the audience then make their way to leave. The plan is that there are still other areas of entertainment that can hold a couple of thousand attendees on site while that peak egress is happening, so that we don't have everybody leaving at exactly the same time, that it's spread out over the period of an hour or so. Historically as well, we see people start to leave the event of their own accord from early evening, 7, 8 p.m, people start drifting off, and then obviously peak egress is when the main stage goes down. In terms of stewarding, the fact that we now have, or will now have, 2 dedicated teams, an interior and an exterior team, will greatly assist in that, because we're no longer reliant on staff who were, say, tasked with looking after the front door, then having to redeploy to get to their position ready for egress. They will already be in those positions. We've identified areas of concern off-site that need additional stewarding. If the license is granted and we continue with the planning of the event, one thing that we will be looking to do is to work with BTP about staffing provisions at Morden Tube Station. We can provide fencing, barrier and stewards in that position to help with queue management down there, but for the last 2 events, I'm not aware of any concerns from London Underground about the influx of our attendees to that station. You mentioned parents coming to pick people up. We'll have a defined area for pick-up and drop-off. We'll have a separate black cab rank operated by London taxi marshals. We'll have a defined area for any groups of customers that have booked a shuttle bus or a coach to bring a group of friends with them, so there'll be an area set aside for that pick-up and drop-off operation. And then we work with a traffic management company who in turn work quite closely with Uber on a lot of events. So we'll be looking to agree a dedicated Uber pick-up spot, and that works by Uber agreeing a blackout, so anybody looking to call an Uber gets directed to a PIN rather than the Uber coming to them. So last year we set up the Uber collection point on York Close. We hired a considerable portion of the car park there for that operation, and that worked relatively well. We're looking for 2019 into the possibility of having 2 locations, so the audience could be split in a couple of directions if they wanted an Uber.
Just on the actual point about, because we've heard from local residents about that particular Uber spot before last year, and references to tensions regarding access to Ubers. How will you be heavily staffing those with security personnel? And sorry, the overgrounds as well. It's fantastic you're going to put that level of support into the tube network, but there's overground stations, both one towards the tube and one away from it as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's an intention of having staff at those positions. We've got a draft of the traffic management plan, which was prepared last week, a traffic and pedestrian management plan. That's currently with TfL Streets for consultation, because they look after London Road, so they're one of the key stakeholders when it comes to talking about transport management away from the site. So that draft is currently with them for their thoughts. In addition to security staff at locations that you've mentioned, and especially when it comes to traffic management, we'll have traffic management stewards, some of whom will be Chapter 8 accredited, some will be CSAS accredited, so they've got traffic powers as well as just being able to steward people. In terms of the main egress from the access road to London Road, when the audience get to London Road, the plan is similar to how it was last year. Last year we had a lane closure in effect, so that we were able to absorb the audience on not just the pavement but the first lane of the road, so that there was no conflict with traffic. The intention is to build on that plan for 2019, so we would still look to have that lane closure in effect, but we would extend that, we'd suspend one bus stop and allow that lane closure to taper in more gradually than it did last year. And as I've mentioned, we're looking to identify an Uber pickup area in the opposite direction, so that audience can sort of get split when they decide if they want to take public transport, which is primarily Morden Tube, but you're right, there are other transport links. So they can go either towards the Tube or to the taxi pickup or the Uber pickup.
I think it was Natalie, I believe, who raised the point before about the egress last year. How are you planning to prevent people hanging around afterwards, and to basically stop disturbances early hours in the night? And this links into a wider question about staffing. When will they be contracted to? I mean, do they at the stroke of midnight, do they vanish, or is there going to be a overlap to make sure that if things do go on continually, that there is enough support available and the police have support and vice versa? And that's tied in also, if you don't mind touching on to my final point about litter and the clean up outside as well.
If I do litter now while it's fresh in my mind, if you remind me of what the other point was. So the separate litter team will be working permanently through the ingress, the live phase and the egress on the exterior of the site. Last year,
sorry, that's fantastic, but operation times, because we've heard from the audience that, you know, they would be walking with themselves or their kids and they come across bottles and various other things, and you know, naturally you miss things in one sweep, two sweeps. Will they be operating, for example, Monday morning at 6 a.m. just to double check because there's light now and they can, that type of, you know, how would they be, you know, you can't get everything, but how are you going to operate on that?
So the bulk of the team would do that initial sweep following the audience from the event site to the transport links, but then you're right, there would be an additional sweep in the daytime to pick up any areas that weren't spotted at night, and yet there's a team on site while we're on site for the breakdown of the festival, so that if any areas are identified that we've missed, we can send a team out to respond to those areas as well.
And so from a staffing perspective, both on security and street clean, you have that wraparound, and you have the effect you will, or I suppose you haven't contracted yet, but I suppose you'll have those levers in there to ensure that they do what is needed to do.
Yeah, we're obviously aware now of concerns from, residents about late night antisocial behaviour. We're aware of particular areas, hotspots. So the external security would have dedicated people in that area. I've mentioned that we're looking to work with Kingdom, who are able to issue fixed penalty notices. These areas would definitely be somewhere that we'd be expecting those guys to focus on. And in terms of shift patterns, we would look to extend those from what was provided last year.
I appreciate you can't give an exact time, but how much would you be significantly extending those just to cover yourself, or how would that work?
So, if, for example, if we say that the music curfew on site is 22:30, we've then got an hour to get people off site, which would take us to 23:30. So if we would probably then look to stand the key staff down an hour after that.
Is there any, I may pick this point up with the police in terms of reporting, but have you, in your own review of what happened last year, found any reporting or any antisocial behaviour incidents after that time? of night?
In terms of, we're aware of it now through anecdotally from the representations from residents. Personally, I didn't witness anything during egress last year, and I was focused on the exterior peak egress phase. Yeah.
With what you've heard tonight, would it be the possibility you could extend that wraparound then? Just to take into consideration any concerns?
Yeah, so we could look to have an overnight, in addition to the overnight static guarding team, we could look to have an overnight response team dedicated to the exterior of the site who could float to any hotspot areas that may still be going on. But pretty confident with the separation and dedication between the two teams, additional numbers and positions, that instances such as that will be mitigated.
Cool. And sort of final question, and relates exactly to your point about responding to concerns and queries and everything else. How, again, I want to understand from yourself how you have that contingency, because it's at the minute it sounds like there's one individual on the phone, one stakeholder manager plus a team. And when we say team, we're talking about contracted staff. Correct me if I'm wrong in a second. And then how do you, because you've got different teams, both internal and external, how do you actually manage all that collectively so you don't have a situation that says, not my problem because it's here, and so it's that interlinking and joined up working, and how do you get that right on a night, linking in your intelligence and sort of thinking before the event, how are you going to test this in terms of, and be mindful of the registry office as well, so that the residents locally have the confidence this is going to be a successful event as in previous years before 2018, and then hopefully, as Stephen sort of alerted to, that because the sensitivities are there hopefully will be less complaints because you've listened, learnt, tested, shown, and all the systems work okay on the night.
So in terms of the sort of management structure on site, we operate what we call event control and event liaison teams. So that's regular meetings on site of all the key department heads. So it's a sort of status update as to what's happening from each team, internally and externally. 8 p.m, the focus of that event liaison team meeting is egress. So all the department heads have a refresher about how egress is going to work, make sure all of their teams are in place for that. We'll very clearly define cut-off points as to where roles and responsibilities sort of stop and start, so that there is no gap in between, as it were. If, for instance, we're talking about the boundary of where one company is cleaning compared to the boundary of where another company is cleaning, that's relatively easy to do. We define the area of the park and then the area beyond the park. In terms of preempting complaints, we're obviously now aware of locations of public urination, problems around litter and ASB. So we've very much so factored those into our plans. We've developed a draft proposal as to how many and where we place external toilets. We've drafted a plan of the surrounding streets and transport routes that we suggest the external cleaning team focus on. Once we engage an external security company, we'll develop a dot plan with those guys to show the number and position of their staff in relation to the exterior of the site. I'm sorry, I can't remember if there are any points that you asked.
It was just the pre-test as well. So how do you test this beforehand? How are you planning to test this? Because I wouldn't want to wait until the night.
Again, by making sure that we've got sufficient staff on site, so we'd build in a tolerance level to the numbers of staff on site, and they're not sort of starting at night. There'll be staff on duty all day throughout the live event, so we're not just waiting for everybody to leave and then cleaning up after them. It's in relation to litter, there's a team permanently working so that we don't.
Sorry, I mean in terms of, so you've got a large cohort of professionals from different companies who may or may not know each other because it's an industry. How are you, before the event, going to bring them together so they know what they're doing, what their jobs are? How are you going to involve the community just so that they are aware what it is? And how are you going to, maybe in a run-up to the event, just test a few of the procedures? You know, how is that going to work in practice?
So in terms of managing the individual contractors on site, that's relatively straightforward. We'll bring them onto site. We'll have regular meetings with them pre us going on site, and then as the site is being built, those contractors can come on site. We can talk about specific areas. We can do walk rounds. We can go and walk areas off site. We can look at those hotspot areas that we've identified off site. And then in terms of testing that it works, we can do tabletop scenario sessions, which is something that the SAG group sometimes organises, which involves a couple of potential scenarios happening, one of which may well be none of the cleaners turn up. What do we do? And then we talk through and stress test the event to make sure that there is a contingency for such a situation.
Cool. No, thank you very much.
Right, so I'm going to thank my colleagues for some fairly forensic questioning that has just taken place and move on. So we go now to the responsible authorities. And first up will be Russ Stevens from the Metropolitan Police.
Thank you, Chair. Russ Stevens, Police Licensing Officer, Metropolitan Police, based at Wimbledon Police Station. I'll start off by saying that this Eastern Electric Festival in Malden Park, first of all, was a one-day event. Took place on the 5th of August 2017. We had around 15,000 attendees. We recorded three thefts, one sexual assault, 5 calls to police regarding antisocial behaviour, and no arrests. The following year, the event had grown to 2 days, took place on the 4th and 5th of August. We had around 20,000 attendees on the Saturday, far less on the Sunday, around 8,000. Over the 2 days, there were 9 calls to the police regarding antisocial behaviour. We had 8 thefts recorded, 1 assault, 1 drugs offence, in addition to 3 arrests for possession of drugs with intent to supply. We had an arrest of a male who was wanted for burglary. There were a number of concerns arose from the 2018 event, and it's absolutely fair to say that communication between the police, the council and the organisers, the communication has been excellent. We have met, we have debriefed 2018 event, and we've continued to meet and discuss the application prior to it going in, and also since the application was submitted, and we've been fine-tuning this. I can say about the problems with 2018, as far as the police are concerned, most of the issues that we were concerned about were outside of the event. As we understand, the event itself, on both days, inside the event, we're quite happy. Outside, the reports of antisocial behaviour, we were unhappy with. There was a visible lack of, or there was a noticeable lack of visible policing, stewarding outside the event. Now, the 2017 event, the organisers did pay for special police services. This assisted us greatly. It meant, I think, off the top of my head, they paid about 12 or 15,000 pounds towards policing. That meant we could draft in additional police officers from across London to assist us with the the role of policing outside the event. But prior to 2018 event, there were legal rulings which made it very difficult in relation to what was the what is the statutory role of the police, and that being policing the public space outside. That has basically meant it was we could no longer take any money from the organisers, and that meant that the police officers that we had were fewer, and we didn't have enough visible high-vis stewarding from the organisers either, so it just looked like there wasn't that much authority, high-vis authority outside the event. This is the perception of that is not good, and we were unable to control antisocial behaviour in the streets at that point. So part of the discussions that we've had are about making sure that this doesn't happen again, and although the statutory role of the police is to police the outside of the event, it is only fair that the organisers contribute some way to that, and that has got to be in the form of their own high-vis stewarding and high-vis security themselves. They have agreed to that, and there are conditions in place now. I can certainly refer to page 24 of the original agenda pack. Condition 8 basically says that there will be a meaningful and a reasonable number of high-vis stewarding and security, and that will be in agreement with the Metropolitan Police prior to the event. So we believe that that situation there has been addressed. Obviously there have been an unacceptable number of complaints with regard to noise. Also, we can see by the number of objections that have been received for this hearing. I mean, we can't ignore that, but I'd like to leave that to the local residents that are here to put that forward. But the another issue we had on the Sunday, and some complaints were received about racist, misogynistic lyrics, lyrics that were coming out from the artists on the Sunday that were inappropriate for people to hear. The Sunday's event had originally been sold to us as similar to the Saturday's event, and that there would be a slightly older audience. As it turned out, that wasn't the case. We were unhappy to have that sprung upon us, that we had what was described as grime royalty and drill artists that turned out, which it meant that the already strapped policing, we had additional things that we had to deal with that. We have discussed that. We have debriefed that. The organisers have promised us that the situation will be different this time. They've offered up a condition to say that they will present to us full details of the artists that will be performing on both days for our early risk assessment. And if we're unhappy, then they have said that they will pull those artists from the event. I'm absolutely more than happy with that. Just going to go back, go back to the security side of things as well. We have worked out the cost of policing this event last year came to just over £50,000 in police hours, basically. This is something, so it's absolutely vital that the organisers take on a burden with regard to that. The conditions are in place. I just want to reinforce that those conditions, when it comes to the organisers offering up what they are going to actually provide, and that has to be in agreement with us. There is a condition in place for that. There are a number of event safety management plans that are living documents that I think it would be unreasonable for them to have those plans absolutely in place right now, but for them they must be presented to the police and the local authority so that we can agree the finer points, like exactly how many stewards and exact positions, and that goes to the toilets as well, that will be in place outside the event. Again, and different from last year, these have been offered as conditions by the applicant. So the organisers, the applicant, has basically agreed to everything that we have asked for when it comes to control measures for this event. I appreciate that, so thank you to them for that. With regard to the swimming pool or the paddling pool, the pool, except 800 millimetres of water, is not deep. I've seen the control measures that are in place to deal with the pool element and to keep it safe, and they certainly do appear on paper as being acceptable. I just want to stop short of saying that I'm absolutely happy with it, because as a considering water, alcohol, the potential that people may have taken illegal drugs as well. There's a recipe there that I just think we need to be very careful about how we look at that. The measures appear to be acceptable. I'm just not an expert in this field, so I find it difficult to actually say I'm absolutely 100% fine with that. Yeah, it's fair to say the communication and the meetings that we've had, the application has been reduced from 3 to 2 days. The capacities have been reduced. I think the issues that we had on the 2018 event has meant that it was difficult. We were unable to. We were unhappy with the fact that it would the potential for a permanent licence. So to have this as a 2-year probationary period, if you like, the police are happy. Police are happy with that. And I think that's as much as I want to say.
We don't want to say we don't like it because of public nuisance.
Yeah, I mean, just with regard to the it needs to be taken into account that the number of complaints that were received for this event. I mean, one consideration is maybe because the council own the park itself, that the local residents were able to make complaints directly to the council, although the complaints themselves weren't received by the police. We had, like I said, 9 calls for ASB straight to the police. Everything else was going through to the council. But this is something that we have concerns about. Is whether or not what is acceptable. Okay, I'd like to leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I'm proposing to do, if it's agreeable to everybody, is that I will take each of the responsible authorities and then invite questions from the applicant across all 3. If that. So I can now move on to the licensing authority and your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Sarah Lefebvre. I'm a barrister instructed to represent the Licensing Authority tonight, representing in particular Mr. Barry Croft, who sits to my immediate left. I know you and your colleagues will be aware of where in the papers you find our representations in the main bundle at pages 40 to 43, and then a supplement in supplement 2 at pages 5 to 11. As the police have just said, and said in their representation, and as said by the applicant this evening, it is right to say that this operator has proved itself to be more than willing to engage with the responsible authorities in the planning process and the planning for previous years and for this year's event. We would frankly expect no less, but it is only right that we recognise good cooperation when we see it. This festival remains a relative newcomer to the festival calendar, and certainly a newcomer to this particular site. And as with probably all larger scale events, there's clearly a very great deal of learning to be extracted from those early iterations. It is unfortunate, to say the least, that in only its 2nd occurrence in 2018, the issues identified by the applicant and thoroughly canvassed, in particular by the residential representations, occurred. In its original form, this was an application that caused significant concern to the licensing authority, partly because of the extent of the application in terms of number of days and scale, and partly because of the permanency of the operation, a permanent license. It is right, and we're grateful, that the applicant has decided to significantly narrow those ambits of its application to mirror the issues that were raised by the licensing authority and the restrictions that were proposed by the licensing authority. We are grateful too that the conditions that have been proposed by the licensing authority have been wholeheartedly accepted and comprehensively accepted by the applicant this evening. May I just take you to those conditions and make some very brief observations about them? And perhaps I'll start with those that are contained in the supplementary agenda at pages 5 through to 7. And may I say this by way of precursive remarks, these conditions fall into perhaps three categories: conditioning in relation to the planning of the event, and ensuring that the event safety management plan becomes a condition on the license and therefore enforceable as a condition. Secondly, conditions proposed to publicly face, as it were, and to inform residents and other persons who might be interested in the controls for the event, so that public-facing documents are produced and promulgated and meetings are set up. And again, that those aspects of community liaison are conditioned into the licence. And then finally, some conditions in respect of capacity and duration, which are restrictions on the general licence. With one exception, these conditions are intended to supersede those that were contained in the original agenda papers. And so it is that if we start at page 5, you see proposed the premises licence holder undertaking detailed consultation with each of the responsible authorities in the run-up to the event. That each year, at least 4 months before the start of the event, the proposed dates will be provided. Well, of course, we've had those this evening. At condition 3, that an initial event safety management plan should be available to the licensing authority. You see open brackets there, at least 3 months or 100 days prior to the commencement of the event period. Those to include any information or improvements identified and agreed from previous debriefing. Specific requirements of the event safety management plan, and it's in those detailed proposals that details such as those that you and your colleagues have flushed very helpfully out of Mr. Dudley and his assistants this evening. We would expect them to appear in those policies and form part ultimately of the conditioning on the premises licence. We expect that initial plan to be presented to us, and when I say us, this is an even more regal we than Mr. Bromley Martin was using, all the responsible authorities and all those who sit on the SAG committees. And you see then at condition 5, a final, so a second fully worked iteration of the event safety management plan, available no less than 30 days before the start of the event period. Those contents, the contents of that plan, should be fully complied with each year, and that converts to a condition of licence on receipt of the approval in writing from the licensing authority. You see too some comfort thereafter in condition 6 that no changes are to be made from that plan or to that plan without the prior written consent of the authority. That bites on the whole 30-day period in the run-up, in the immediate run-up to the event. So we recognise the living document status. We recognise that an event of this scale takes a very considerable degree of planning, but we do expect a degree of stasis and crystallisation, a good period, that is 30 days before the event itself. Condition 12, I should have taken you to that previously, relates to further consultation on the contents of the ESPMP documents in the run-up to that final version. 7, 8 and 9 are intended to deal with some of the community liaison issues. So you see at condition 7 that the licence holder to produce a public-facing document based on the ESMP to ensure that local residents and others are kept informed. That to be produced no later than 56 days before the beginning of the event period. Information and proper understanding is perhaps the beginning and key to proper community liaison, and that's why that condition has been proposed. You see at 8 and 9 publicised meetings to be set up both prior to and following an event in both of the years, if you are minded to grant the application as granted, in order to discuss the event in the first place and receive residential feedback. Conditions 10 and 11 perhaps speak to themselves. Mr. Bromley Martin has already indicated the numbers that would need to be included in proposed condition 10. May I take you then to the original representation at pages 40. It starts at page 40. The conditions start at page 41. I'm into the main papers now. And the condition that does survive is condition 3. That is, the event site shall be closed and clear of patrons, members of the public, by 23:30 hours on the Saturday and 2300 hours on the Sunday. That, of course, finds perfect reflection in the police representation and conditions. And finally, as Mr. Bromley Martin said some time ago now, we don't pursue the requirement for electronic identification of persons as they present themselves. So that is the representation that the conditions, as they find approval with the committee, find their way onto any premises licence you're minded to grant this evening. Other than that, we echo that which has been already said by the Metropolitan Police Service.
Thank you very much. I mean, we have actually sort of had the opportunity to read through, of course, the representations that you've made. I'm going to move to environmental health.
I'm sorry.
Hi, good evening. My name's Andrew Pickup. I'm an environmental health officer. Following the amendments to the application, which has resulted in a reduction of the duration of the festival, it is likely there will be a lesser impact than the 3-day event. It seems appropriate to adjust the noise level criteria slightly from those initially suggested, while still providing a good degree of protection for residents in close proximity to Morden Park and further afield. I've discussed the noise issues from last year's festival with the organisers and the level of complaints that have been received by the council. We requested that a suitable and workable noise management plan was produced prior to this subcommittee hearing, and this has now been undertaken and is included on page 13 of the supplementary agenda 2. The noise management plan is a working document that has a main objective about how and by who the noise is monitored and managed, together with how complaints are handled, recorded and actioned. The noise management plan allows flexibility in measurement locations, and these will be agreed prior to the event and could be dependent on weather conditions, and we would expect these to include locations close to residential properties. The noise levels contained in the noise management plan are lower than the previous event, which was an important factor to ensure a reduction in the impact the festival has on residents. The average target level proposed is 65 decibels A-weighted when measured over a 15-minute period, with a maximum level of 70 decibels. A low frequency target level of 85 dB at 63 Hertz is proposed, at which point further investigation is required and any possible action carried out to meet this level. Following the draft submission of the noise management plan, which was reviewed, Environmental Health provided feedback requesting amendments, and these have been included in the final version of the noise management plan, which is now acceptable to Environmental Health. In summary, the plan largely incorporates the conditions outlined in my initial representation, but allows some slight flexibility on the noise levels given the reduced event duration. Staff from Environmental Health would be present at the event to monitor compliance with the noise management plan and also undertake some noise measurements to ensure compliance. We have recommended 4 conditions which are on page 10 of the supplementary agenda 2, and these relate to the noise management plan is implemented and adhered to throughout the duration of the event, some monitoring locations in relation to the location of noise sensitive premises. The organisers for the festival take full responsibility for setting up and management of the noise management hotline, which must be available throughout the event, and confirmation of the amplified music times that the festival will operate to.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I'm going to ask the applicant if you want to make any questions to the various responsible authorities.
Thank you. And it was more to direct the committee's attention in relation to the artists on the Sunday in 2018 and the inappropriate lyrics. This is addressed, I think we'll find, in Rob Dudley's statement at page 6 of Supplementary Agenda 1. And it sets out there what occurred in 2018. I wouldn't want Russ for you to think that we were criticising the Metropolitan Police in any way at all, but what it amounts to is this, is that we've worked out a way of dealing with this for this year, and we are therefore proposing an amendment to condition 9 of the application. And it's set out there on page 6. Secondly, we quite understand that the difficulties of the legal difficulties involved in paying for police services. We just want it to be known that we are ready, willing and able to pay for police services if and when it is ever proper and appropriate and possible to do so. The pool, we quite appreciate your concerns. Could I ask you if the council's public safety were content with the arrangements for the pool, would you be? Yes. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to move straight away to the interested parties to see whether they have any questions to the responsible authorities. If not, then I'm going to ask my colleagues on the committee if they have any particular questions to responsible authorities.
Just 3 quick questions. So, yes, perhaps I'm being obtuse, but contrary to what the applicant told me, PC Stevens, you're telling me there were fewer police in 2018 than 2017. Is that correct?
believe we had pretty much the same number of police for the event in 2017 as we have for 2018. We would have liked more officers, or we would have liked more policing for the 2018 event, but we were unable to produce those officers. I can certainly point out as well the difficulty with policing that we have is that this is the first week in August. Police officers themselves as well would like to have time with their families, take annual leave. It's a time when police numbers are strapped due to annual leave. By having the special police services paid for, it meant that we had a larger pool of officers that we could take from. As it stood for the 2018 event, they were all local police officers that we had to use, and we found that difficult to police.
And just a quick question of information. Sorry.
The police officers we used last year were redeployed. We've made an estimate of around about £50,000 in their police officers' time. That's my calculation based on predominantly discussing it with the bosses who were involved in the event last year. Most of those officers were not there on overtime. They were redeployed from other duties, so they weren't able to do the normal patrolling in the immediate vicinity, do the other investigation that they would have otherwise been doing in a time of difficulties and cuts for police services. So that has an effect not just on the local residents, but the residents across the whole of Merton, not just in the immediate area, and the same thing would happen is likely to happen in 2019. We will use the same officers, but they will be redeployed as well as their costs, and that means they're not able to do other investigative work or patrolling work that they would normally be doing on a weekend.
And just a point of information, given I think my local football teams pay for police, that's allowable, but you're telling me now it's not allowable for them to be paid for by the organisers?
Between us. Effectively, there was legislation that came in both from the Reading Festival and from RV Leeds in West Yorkshire that limited the amount of money that could be charged. And it means that effectively we cannot charge for any money at the moment for any special policing. It's to do with technical legal stuff that's gone above our pay grades, is the simple version.
On Mr. Barry's evidence, I'm just unclear on the numbers that on your original submission. You talked about 30,000 for the Saturday and 8,000 for the Sunday. And I thought it was said that all the conditions were agreed with, but that's different to the numbers. So maybe I've missed something there.
It's probably my fault for trying to short-circuit it. Mr. Bromley-Martin did accurately set out the numbers as agreed, I think, by all responsible authorities and with the applicant. So the sliding scales that we see reflected in the applicant's further submissions in Supplementary Agenda 1 at page 5 for 2019 and 2020 are those that are agreed.
And lastly, Mr. Pickup, you anticipated my question about you relaxing the noise limits. Can you just take me through the thinking? You know, we're going from 3 days to 2 days. So you've relaxed the noise limits. Can you explain to me how that works, the logic of that argument?
We feel that there'll be less disruption for the 2 days than there would be over a 3-day event. There has been previous guidance in relation to noise levels and the number of days, and we have taken into account some of that guidance when making a judgment as to having a slight relaxation on the noise levels.
As I'm not an expert on sound levels, can you explain to me what the relaxation is exactly?
Well, we've agreed a reduction of around 5 decibels from previous years.
No, I mean the relaxation you've allowed from your original view to the relaxation you've allowed now, because it's gone to 2 days. I'm just trying to get my head round what the relaxation is exactly.
Does a relaxation mean a reduction?
Can I direct you to... I'm talking about page 10. On supplementary agenda 2. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. What we took into account also was the discussions that we had with the noise consultant and the way that they would be managing the noise levels on and off site, and also their criteria for holding the event and the patron satisfaction of attending such an event.
Okay, so back to my question, which is, can you explain to me what you've relaxed exactly? What is the extent of your relaxation of the initial limit you brought to the one you've now agreed to? What have you've allowed them to go louder, presumably.
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
It says on page 10, the conditions outlined in my initial representation allow some slight flexibility on noise levels given the reduced event duration. So you've somehow relaxed the limits, and I'm just trying to find out in what way you've relaxed the limits. Could you explain to me in layman's terms what the relaxation is?
We've allowed the noise levels to increase because of the 2-day event as opposed to a 3-day event.
Thank you, that was my question. Thank you.
Could I just ask Steve Anderson just to explain about that? Because as we can see on page 45 of the agenda report, those there set out were the original figures in condition 1 and 2. Now, I don't confess to understanding this either. May I say it once, which is why I'm going to ask Mr. Steve Anderson to deal with it. What can you say about the level of 70 decibels set out in condition 2?
Well, I think Andrew probably needs to explain his thinking rather than me on his behalf. But I think that the overall dBA level, which is what most people would refer to and what is still universally used at events, was reduced from the previous year to a target of 65 and 70, whereas previously it was 70-75. So I think we're probably talking about the low frequency area, because version 1 and version 2 say more or less the same thing in terms of the reduction by 5 dB in the overall limit, which is what was measured and was what applied in 2018.
Could you explain what is the change in Andrew Pickup's position from page 45 to page 45 of the agenda report to page 10 of the second supplement? What movement has he made between conditions 1 and 2 on page 45 and what he says on page 10.
Okay, and the same caveat applies, me interpreting somebody else's documents, but I guess if I can shed any light, the low frequency criteria is, from an acoustician's point of view, notoriously difficult to measure definitively and to apply as a limit. There are various reasons of that. It's mainly to do with disaggregation of noise from natural sources of road traffic, wind noise and things like that. So to have it as a limit is a very difficult thing, which is why people generally don't use it. However, it is that low frequency area that is most concerning to people. So for events where I would be involved where there's no reference to low frequency, I would routinely refer to it as a tool to look and see if that was out of the relationship with the overall noise from the site. If it was, you would then look at drilling down to see where that was and what was causing it, and can we remove that? Because very often you can remove an element of that bass noise without impacting on the enjoyment within the festival, but making a difference to people in the community. So I think it was a discussion that we looked at that 70 and came up with something that was more workable as an actual practical tool, but would not be a limit. So there's a reference to it because Andrew was keen that we should be held to delivering that.
When you refer to a tool, are you talking about the means by which the noise is measured?
Sorry, no, not a physical tool. It's a reference point to help you interpret what you're listening to and to where you can apply efforts to make reductions that may be appropriate depending on what you're listening to. Whereas with dBA, you're measuring an absolute limit, and it's fairly clear, as long as you don't have an ice cream van parked beside you, exactly what you're measuring. It's not quite the same with measuring low frequency noise. So I described it as using it as a tool to interpret what to do about managing it.
And is that what you understand by the expression of flexibility?
Yes, but I'm still struggling. So have you just removed the limit and decided you will use professional judgment?
No, I don't think it was ever going to be applied as a limit. It was there as, or the intention I think was a reference point, but that was the position that we've ended up with, is that it's a reference point. So if I'm measuring levels that include that level of sub-noise, you'll then have to look further, and that's part of the process that's got to be now built into the noise management plan to determine what the cause of that was and whether it's something that could be removed.
I think the phrase "shall not be exceeded" reads like a limit to me, doesn't it, you? On the original, page 45.
So I would have to defer to Andrew as he wrote that, and I would be inclined to say yes. Following discussions, it was agreed that to actually apply it as a limit would not be useful.
So my point is correct. You've removed the limit.
Yeah, perhaps I'm going to have to give you. I didn't really want to have to bore you with decibel levels, but
is it? Sorry, it's to not go sort of 101 sort of sound engineering. Was what being discussed mean it'd be higher or lower than the previous year, and how also how I think Paul's wider point is it's that management by exemption and how you actually action that.
And my understanding of the previous year is that there was no reference whatsoever to low frequency noise. So this has now been introduced as an additional control over what was there previously, as well as the 5 dB reduction. So there was no reference to sub-bass noise in terms of carrying out any measurement or indeed any control of it.
And the issue for residents has been the low bass noise, as you said. So I'm just trying to work out why a limit was set initially, then it was reduced, and I'm still not clear why it was, or why it was taken away, and I'm still not clear why it was. You know, the issue is low bass noise. We have a limit initially, then it's relaxed on the basis the festival is shorter. I just don't see the logic.
I think that, well, again, this is somebody else's document that I'm being invited to talk to. I think 70 dB essentially wouldn't work at this sort of proximity. So a lot of the references to noise levels are drawn from the only definitive document that's still available, which was drafted in 1996, which makes a footnote reference to low frequency noise. The level of 70 dB is a reference that applies several kilometers from an event site, whereas we're interested in the most vulnerable, nearest noise-sensitive people who are on Low Morden Road and Hillcrest, and so and other areas. So you're looking at distances of 250, 400 meters as those people inside that inner area. So 70 is not workable at 65 dBA. And the best example I can give you for that, the only event that springs to mind that I look after from a noise management point of view, using the same 65 dBA level, is a festival in Cheltenham, which is right in the middle of Edwardian Terraces in a park, and that's Cheltenham Jazz Festival. The trigger level there is 85. Now, Cheltenham Jazz Festival isn't noted for its preponderance of drum and bass acts, so it's much lighter, generally much lighter music. So 70 would apply at a distance from the site. It wouldn't work in the near proximity because you will get that level almost in the environment anywhere.
Okay, well, all I would say is that I think that's quite important. What you're basically saying is that the figure initial just wouldn't work, it was wrong, and we've got rid of it. Now, to put that in a document which just says a little bit more flexibility doesn't engender trust and openness. From my perspective, we need to be clear what we're doing. And that seems to be just passed through the papers as if no one would notice. It's just not that impressive, I think.
Councillor Coda, I'm concerned because, of course, this is Andrew Pickup's 2 documents, and I'm concerned that it's difficult to understand these things, and we have no doubt that there's been absolutely no question of Andrew Pickup being anything other than absolutely straightforward. These are complicated things because it all depends upon what measurement you're using, and indeed for what purpose you're using the measurement. So, for instance, the measurement of the average target level of 65 dBA referred to on page 10 there, and it's the equivalent with a maximum of 70 dBA, is the same figure as is referred to on page 45 in condition 1. And that's 65 decibels measured as LAEQ over a 15-minute period. That isn't a maximum level of noise. That's an average of noise over a 15-minute period. So it's not possible to term it in terms of a limit because it doesn't actually limit. What it actually limits is the average. which means that, for instance, if you were limited to an average of 50 miles an hour as you drove along the motorway, that would allow you to drive at 60 miles an hour for half the time and 40 miles an hour for the other half of the time. That's how complicated it gets. And that's why Mr. Andrew Pickup is talking about flexibility. He's talking about the flexibility of how you measure it. And the second one on page 45, for instance, condition 2, that is relating only to low-frequency sound. And there are all sorts of complications in relation to, under the old POP code, for instance, the low-frequency limit was 70 decibels, but at 2 miles. So again, the question arises, where are you measuring this? Because in fact, as you saw in Andrew Pickup's Appendix 2, I think it was, 70 decibels is merely the sound of ordinary moderate traffic noise. So it's not possible to have a limit of 70 decibels, as it were, immediately by the site itself, because it would pick up 70 decibels in traffic noise alone. That's why I say this is complicated, and I don't confess to understanding it myself at all. But we are quite confident. I'm sure that Steve Anderson will come for us. There's no question of Andrew Pickup being anything other than absolutely straightforward. And when he talks about flexibility, that isn't some sort of euphemism for reducing the limits. It's merely looking at them in a different way. At least that's our view.
I think we therefore move on. Do you want to ask a quick question?
Thank you, Chair. I've got sort of several, admittedly not as long as previously, but I'll just go through them again in terms of noise, security and litter and then anything else. But linking back to the conversation we've just had then, I think the reassurance then for indeed myself and Paul and David would be, it is the reporting of that noise then and how you would manage it. Now, how are you going to be integrating teams and colleagues from the authority, from the police and from environmental health to support in that, but also to manage the exemptions as part of the wider team, so that there's a greater understanding of what's going on. Understand you'll have a management process for the contractors and for everyone here, but how is the communication going to work? Are teams going to be integrated? How would that actually work on the ground, so that again, when we talk about a break in the licensing in terms of sound, for example, there is a confidence there and the flexibility that it's going to be rapidly resolved before conditions are then put in place.
So in terms of integration and management on site, the previous site meetings that I made reference to, event liaison team meetings, that also includes representatives from the statutory authorities. So police would attend that, environmental health officers would attend that, trading standards would attend that, licensing would attend that. Anybody else from the SAG group who happens to be present on site would be at those meetings. In terms of monitoring specifically noise on site, so Steve's team would be on site making sure that the noise management plan that we've agreed with EHO is being delivered. And then in terms of scrutiny of Steve's team, EHO have officers on site, essentially checking the work that Steve's doing to make sure that it is compliant with the plan. And then post-event, we produce a detailed noise management debrief report, which we share with the environmental health and the SAG, and that outlines where we took readings, when we took readings, and what those readings were.
Thank you. Are the police, local licensing authority and environmental health happy with those arrangements and have confidence that you have access that you need and a relationship that on the night, if things were to go wrong, you could act accordingly?
If I can answer that.
Sorry.
I'll just say, with regard to those measures, we're more than happy with the relationship that we have with the organisers. They've been forthcoming with everything that we've asked for, and from practice from last year's event, then yes, we're happy that those measures are in place.
We would carry out our own independent monitoring and also liaise with the noise consultants employed by the applicant to ensure that if any noise issues arise, that we can deal with them appropriately.
Do you, on the independent monitoring, you have the resource to do that aside from the team already by the event organiser?
Yes, we have our own noise monitoring equipment and staff members to be on site during the event.
Again, apologies, I know it's slightly tactical, but you have plans to then, the reports from the public, you're going to be sharing information, making sure that there's no duplication of effort and everyone's sort of working together, and it's sort of that type of co-working. Is there is a plan for that in these documents which we haven't seen yet?
We do intend to work with the applicant's noise consultant with regards to any issues that arise.
Okay. So on the security side, sorry, Russ, would you confirm again on are you comfortable with the swimming pool?
Yeah, sorry, you just asked me about the swimming pool.
I did.
Again, I've seen documents with measures in place. I'm absolutely confident that within a reasonable time prior to the event to take place, there will be acceptable documents presented to us that confirm the control measures are in place. I can't still say that I'm 100% happy, because at the end of the day we're talking drugs, water, or potential for drugs, water and alcohol, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. But they must comply with health and safety regulations, and all reasonable control measures, I am confident, will be in place.
What about the amnesty policy that was previously talked about? Have you fed back into that? And from previous years, I assume you've got intelligence. You couldn't make all the arrests because of a variety of reasons, but you've got intelligence on on individuals who you're keeping a close watch on. How is that being played into this, in terms of ticket sales, in terms of on the day itself, in terms of the electronic monitoring of IDs? How is that going to work, just to make sure that we've got everything squared away?
Communication is good between us and the organisers, so they are supplying information as they get it with regard to the demographic of the people that are attending and the artists themselves. We were actually surprised certainly the first year, actually the people that are attending this event are not a risk to us. They're a lot nicer than we thought they would be, to be honest. We struggled with the Sunday event, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, has been addressed. So I'm confident that we can keep tabs on who's coming and the type of people that are coming, and any intelligence I'm confident that the organisers will share with us.
But can we have that as part of these plans? Just so, again, you've got a list of names, they've got a list of names. We know, I know from my own ward work that we know who sells drugs locally. We know while I wouldn't want to forbid anyone from attending an event, you understand that if they're on the ground, it's how you brief people, and it's just that information sharing.
Yeah, a number of the conditions that have been offered up that we hope to have put on this licence, if it's granted, refer to safety management plans, which will be presented to us in good time, and all that information, everything that we require when it comes to security measures, I'm confident that they'll be in place as part of those safety management plans.
All right, thank you. And one final question to the licensing authority. In relation just to the granting of a multi-year licence in respect, more of a view on the value of scrutiny from subcommittees, wouldn't it be more appropriate to have a single year licence in terms to secure the scrutiny following this event as well?
Say that we certainly considered that. The licensing authority were faced in the first place with an application for a permanent license. From there, we've come a very long way down. A proposal of 2 years is perhaps a recognition that there have been 2 single-year licenses granted to date. There remains, of course, the possibility of a review being brought either by the licensing authority or, in fact, most other people in this room in that 2 period, if the applicant were to fail to live up to the promises and the plans and the processes that they're describing to you this evening. So yes, of course, there's an argument for it being a single-year event, but a 2-year event is a very, very significant reduction from an unlimited premises license duration.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's 10 minutes past 9. We're going to have a very, very short comfort break, if for no other reason I need one. So, so we are going to have 5 minutes. We will resume at 9:15.